Most people don't think about backup power when everything is working. The lights turn on, the internet stays connected, the refrigerator runs, and energy feels almost invisible. Until one day, it isn't. A short outage, a sudden interruption, a storm, and suddenly something that felt guaranteed starts feeling uncertain. That moment is becoming more familiar for many people, and it helps explain why backup power solutions are gaining attention. But the interesting part isn't the technology, it's the shift in behavior, because people aren't only reacting to outages anymore, they're starting to think differently before outages happen. At first, the motivation seems practical: keep the lights on, maintain internet access, protect food, continue working. But underneath those practical concerns, something deeper is happening. People are becoming more aware of dependency. Most households rely on energy systems they rarely see. Electricity arrives continuously. Demand changes automatically. Power appears exactly when needed. And because this happens every day, people stop noticing how much stability is being provided in the background. Until there's a disruption. That's when invisible infrastructure suddenly becomes visible. And once people experience that shift, their questions change. Not, how likely is another outage, but, what happens if I don't have another option? That question changes how people think about energy. Because backup power isn't always about emergencies. Sometimes it's about reducing uncertainty. That distinction matters. People often imagine backup systems as something extreme, something reserved for remote areas or severe conditions. But more households are starting to see backup differently. Not as replacement, as support. And support feels more realistic. Because most people aren't trying to disconnect completely. They want continuity. The ability to maintain normal life when conditions become less predictable. And continuity creates a completely different decision process. At first, people usually compare technologies. Generators, battery storage, solar backup, hybrid systems. But eventually they realize they're not really choosing equipment. They're choosing behavior. Generators prioritize immediate availability. Battery systems prioritize stored reliability. Solar systems prioritize ongoing generation. Each one handles uncertainty differently. And that's where expectations begin to evolve. Because people discover there isn't one perfect solution. Every backup approach introduces trade-offs. Fuel, storage, maintenance, weather, capacity. What changes is where the dependency moves. That realization creates an important turning point. The real issue isn't whether backup power works. It's deciding what type of interruption feels acceptable. Because everyone already manages limits. The difference is whether those limits are chosen or imposed. And backup systems shift part of that control. That doesn't guarantee certainty, but it changes the response. People stop asking, how do I avoid outages? And start asking, how do I stay functional when they happen? That's a very different mindset. And it explains why interest continues growing. Not because people suddenly want complex energy systems, but because reliability has become more visible. There's also a psychological layer. Backup power changes how uncertainty feels, even when systems are rarely used. Because knowing there is another option changes perception. It creates confidence. And confidence changes decisions. That's one reason backup power solutions are receiving more attention. Not because the world suddenly changed overnight, but because awareness did. People are paying more attention to what keeps daily life moving. And once you notice how dependent modern routines are on uninterrupted energy, you start understanding why alternatives become easier to justify. If you want to explore how different backup systems compare and what factors people usually consider when evaluating them, there's a structured breakdown in the description. You can also find a practical guide and step-by-step framework that explains how backup approaches are typically evaluated in real-world conditions. And as always, the goal isn't to recommend a single solution. It's to understand why the interest is growing in the first place.